Okay, folks, welcome to my latest series reviewing the future. What is the future? The future is actually the latest novel, well, not the latest, almost the latest novel from Stefan Molyneux. And right away, I have to do a little bit of diffusing Stefan Molyneux's reputation, because if you were to go to Wikipedia and look him up, here is what you would find. Stefan Basil Molyneux is an Irish-born Canadian far-right white nationalist podcaster who promotes conspiracy theories, white supremacy, scientific racism, men's rights, and racist views. That is the gospel according to Wikipedia. And basically, I read the article, and having listened to Stefan Molyneux's program for the last, oh God, I want to say it's been 5 years now, I can tell you this is kind of garbage. Basically, there is a difference between what a person believes and how the media, especially the mainstream media, will present what you believe to the public. And in the case of Wikipedia, what you'll find is things like, well, let's take an example. Here's what you believe. The political left encourages mass migration to the West because it benefits the left. And the media will say, that's conspiracy theory. You're a conspiracy theorist. Even though just recently we had the president of Mexico telling Mexican Americans how they should be voting in our elections, and it wasn't for the right. Oh my goodness. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that Mexican Americans necessarily obey his word, but who knows? Maybe there are some who will. But in any case, what that shows is that this is not exactly a conspiracy theory when they are out loud stating it in the media what it is that they want, and Democrats have done that before. So, nevertheless, you're going to get smeared. Much of what we call civilization comes from the European Enlightenment. Okay, fact check, I think that's true. But if you were to say so, then obviously you're a white supremacist, oh my god! What about races may differ in average IQ just as they may differ in average height, average weight, etc. By the way, that's not saying that any of these qualities have to stay the same over time. 50 years from now, maybe this will all change. Oh, maybe the averages will all change. Nevertheless, that's scientific racism. Or how about a mother who beats her kids shouldn't keep the kids in a divorce? Sounds kind of reasonable, but that makes you a men's rights activist. Last but not least, different cultures can lead to different levels of success. Well, that's just racist. Yeah, so if you actually have listened to Stefan Molyneux for the past few years, like I have, you would know that the Wikipedia article is a hit piece practically from beginning to end. I mean, it's got some little factoids there about his upbringing. It's got some factoids about things his wife has done, things he's done as far as his previous career to being a podcaster. But by and large, it's like one hit piece after another, and this whole thing just reads like if you were to if you were had never known anything about Stefan Molyneux and then had listened to him for 5 years and then you went to Wikipedia, you'd be looking at this like, what the hell? Are we talking about the same guy? Because over time, if you want to pay attention to Mikeypedia, you would know that I have learned he's an Irish-born Canadian anarcho-capitalist podcaster who promotes philosophy, non-aggressive parenting, stateless societies, and hard-boiled scientific empiricism, all of which can be spun into the slanders that you've seen before. Now, you might be a little bit triggered by that word anarcho-capitalist. I mean, is that like white supremacy in disguise? Well, only if this guy's a white supremacist too, because none other than Eric July is himself an anarcho-capitalist. So I think these guys would get along famously. I don't think, and I certainly don't think Eric July is a white supremacist or white nationalist. Oh, goodness me. So if you don't want to take my word for it, you can always, of course, find out for yourself. Here's how to find Stefan Molyneux online. He's got his own website, freedomain.com. You can go to his Rumble channel for Freedomain. You can also go to the Freedomain channel on BitChute. Probably easier to look up Freedomain or Stefan Molyneux to try and type up that hash there. And then there is his subscription service with extra stuff like call ins and live streaming. And also, all of his books are available for free on Locals. So you can go to the free domain locals.com. And I believe for $5 a month, you can get access to everything of his. Plus, on occasion, he will send out a coupon for a free trial. So if you take advantage of that, then you get 30 days free and download whatever books you're interested in and then go on your merry way. Won't even cost you a dime. So it's important to understand who Stefan Molyneux is from this perspective, because his philosophy and the things that he believes and promotes are going to come through in the book that I'm going to review, just as it has come through in some of his prior books, like The God of Atheists, which is a work of fiction set in modern day times about some families who are kind of trying to get one up on society. And then you've got the historical novel Almost. Now, both of these are actually available on Free Domain as audiobooks, and they are performed by Stefan Molyneux himself, and they're awesome because he is a classically trained actor. So you would be well served to check out these books on audio. Now, the book that we're actually going to be reviewing is The Future, which is one of his latest books. And according to the book description on freedomain.com, centuries in the future, an old man awakens from cryogenic sleep to face the judgment of a utopian society that barely survived his past abuse of power. In the vein of Atlas Shrugged, philosopher Stefan Molyneux has created a compelling and powerful work of imagination. He vividly describes the wonderful future that mankind can achieve and the barriers to getting there, all that we need to leave behind to finally live in peace. Now, you might not be familiar with Atlas Shrugged. Atlas Shrugged was the masterwork by Ayn Rand, who promoted a philosophy called objectivism, and it's actually a philosophy with which Stefan Molyneux had some dalliances back in the day before developing his own philosophies. And Atlas Shrugged is considered her masterwork, her magnum opus. It's about 1,000-page book describing the collapse of society and the examination of the rot upon which society is founded, and how a better free market based society could be founded if we were to basically get out of the way of the people capable of founding that, the people who actually have the talent in society. So if we take a look at Atlas Shrugged and realize that this is Ayn Rand's masterwork, what Stefan Molyneux's website is basically saying is that the future is going to be in that similar vein. It's going to be his masterwork that is going to be communicating his philosophy, his ideas for a stateless society, his ideas for the better future that we could have if we would just get out of our own way and allow it to happen. Now, with that being said, let's get into the prologue of the future. And yes, I will be spoiling items along the way. I'm going to be examining the book in some amount of detail, not like line for line by any means, but I will be telling you things that happen in the book. So if you are interested in picking up the future and either reading it along with this examination or reading it for yourself and then coming back and watching these reviews, then I would highly suggest you go to freedomain.locals.com. I'll make sure to put a link to that in the video description so that you can sign up and pick up a copy of The Future and then read along or read it and then come back here, whichever it is you choose to do. But spoiler warning has been given. I'm going to go ahead. So the first thing that happens in the prologue is that we learn that 95% of humanity has perished in a 4 centuries long war. Now, this is kind of it seems to be a basic tenet of anarcho-capitalism that our present civilization is headed for collapse. That our society, the way that it is built, especially with the debt that we are going to be crushed under, is going to bring society down into a state of really total anarchy. We're going to completely lose it. There's going to be a humongous war. we cannot expect security in the future, and the only thing that we can hope to do is kind of shore up against that day. Now, Molyneux's next book, called The Present, which I believe is a prequel to The Future, naturally, is supposed to explore the collapse of society and show how things get to the point of the war beginning. But at this point, mankind has already been in a war for about 4 centuries. By the way, according to anarcho-capitalism, civilization really must collapse. I mean, there must be a complete overhaul, because you can't really do anything with a nation state so as to make it give up power. States have a natural tendency to accumulate more and more centralized power as they go, and they're just not they're going to keep hold of it with diamond hands until they finally collapse. And that's the only way that an anarcho-capitalist society, a stateless society, is going to form. And let me be a little bit clearer on what a stateless society is. A stateless society is one in which all social relationships are, at their core, voluntary. You're not compelled to belong to the government as we all are today. You know, it's not like you're necessarily issued a social security number upon being born, or upon turning 14. I can't remember exactly how that worked for me. But people are not compelled to be under a government structure that they do not opt into, but rather they are voluntary subscribers to memberships that are offered by sort of corporations, they're businesses really, called dispute resolution organizations. And these dispute resolution organizations serve as contract enforcers, contract mediators. They basically occupy the same kind of place in society as a court would, except that you have the option of going to one dispute resolution organization or another as you see fit. And moreover, if you and somebody else who's under a different DRO get into some dispute resolution, well, they have ways of working with each other to make sure that a fair settlement is reached. So you don't have a government per se, and you're not forced to pay taxes to it. You're not forced to accept its services, like people are forced to get Medicare at age 65. You always have options, so long as those options are available under the subscriptions that are available to you from these DROs. And the assumption is that there will be competition among these, and people will be able to subscribe to the ones that they want. So DROs, because they compete with one another, serve as a free market replacement for the state. And their incentives, as we will come to see through the course of this book, their incentives will be to minimize their costs, and which end up minimizing the costs to society of things like crime, of things like theft and violence. And they will take what steps are needed to actually protect citizens, as opposed to serve ideologies that may or may not protect citizens. So we will see over the course of this book what the future looks like in a stateless society. I just want to familiarize you with that concept so that you'll know what it is we're getting into here. Now, a group of men emerge from a mountain cave with boxes in tow. Now, remember, the world has been at war for 4 centuries with no end in sight. And all of a sudden, there's this group of men who come out of a cave, and they've got these boxes behind them. Now, this is analogous to Plato's allegory of the cave. There's a very famous allegory by the philosopher Plato back in times BC, where it talks about a man who's chained to a wall, and there's a fire behind him with figures who are moving back and forth in front of the fire, and all the guy can see excuse me, is the flickering of figures on the wall. And so if you took that man and freed him, then that man would be able to walk around and explore and realize that, oh, what I've been seeing on the wall, these flickering figures, that's not reality. The reality was actually behind me. all the time. And it's these actual figures who are moving in front of the fire and the fire itself that are the reality. And moreover, I'm in a cave. And I can leave the cave and I can actually experience the world outside the cave. And there's so much more to the world than I ever knew. So, this idea of the men emerging from the cave to bring this enlightenment to society is kind of, there's an analogy that's really actively at work here. It's not a perfect analogy, but no analogy ever is. Now, these men are stated to have no families, and that's important because families constitute the transmission of values from generation to generation. So these men are really rolling the dice, and they have sacrificed their biological future, their continuance through children, to give a future to humanity. Because right now, humanity, I mean, it's on the edge of being wiped out, and there's no future worth having unless they can give it one. So as a satellite laser rains death from above, the moment they're out of the cave, all of a sudden they're targets. The doomed men unleash the contents of the boxes, tiny weaponized drones. A little kind of reminder of Scott Adams' second fiction book, The Religion War, which dealt with drone warfare. But anyway, in this case, we have these tiny weaponized drones. Now, the men themselves all die, and their names are not even recorded. Even the leader's name is not recorded, but their drones survive to pave the way for mankind's utopian future. The men gave their all for the future. It's like the ultimate sacrifice. Not only do they die unknown. Now, the drones themselves are literally called angels, and this is where we get into some what I call kind of sketchiness, because I see a problem first in the fact that this is more of a technical note than anything else. The angels are initially described as blonde, dark creatures with whirring white rings, but they're later described as having pink hands. Which is it? Are they dark or are they pink? Unless there is a shading difference between their hands and the rest of their bodies, you really need to pick one of those and run with it, because either that or just describe to us how they are colored all over. Now, what's especially problematic is that these angels have blonde hair and blue eyes. Huh. Why did these men in a cave bother to give them blonde hair and blue eyes? I'm not really understanding that. And here's one of the things where when you know that you've been labeled a white supremacist by people, even though you can't be, because anarcho-capitalism doesn't allow for nation states of any kind, so you can't have a nation that puts whites above any other races. That just doesn't happen. It's a logical inconsistency. But when you know that people are labeling you this anyway, why in the hell are you giving an impression here that you're having white people who brought civilization before now bringing civilization back? It's just a bad look. It looks like you're just, giving white people way too much appreciation, given the past history of how you've been slandered. So I just kind of marvel that somebody didn't communicate to him along the way that, do you really want to make these drones have these Aryan qualities? Because that's just kind of ew. But that's not really the major problem with the prologue. The big problem with the prologue is that it reads like a creation myth. We're talking about a future society here. And here's the thing. I mean, because between the Platonic analogy and the humanoid-looking angels, it reads like this Greco-Roman version of Genesis. You really feel like you're diving into mythology here, like this is a mythological beginning for the future society. And the problem with that is that science fiction's major challenge is to create a believable world. You want the reader to believe that this world is possible. And and moreover, this book is supposed to make us believe that This could be our future. So there's no room for creation myths in the future. When you set up your sci-fi books world with an origin that reads like mythology, that undermines the believability of the future you're going to present. So you don't want to start out like once upon a time and then make you think that you're talking about something that could possibly be real world. Once upon a time automatically triggers you to go into fantasy. And yet that is how this whole analogy of the cave and this creation of these humanoid angels who actually have hands that hold weapons. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Now, there may be a reason for it later on. I can't say that there isn't. I mean, perhaps later on in the book, we're going to find that the reason that the angels were made in this anthropomorphic form was so that they didn't scare the hell out of whoever it was that they were approaching. However, I mean, if they look like white people, I know there's probably minorities out there who'd be bothered by the advent of all these mechanical white people floating down from the sky on these white wings. So who the hell knows? I don't know what the explanation might be in the book's later chapters, but all I have to go on right now is that you've got these men in a cave bringing enlightenment to the world through these humanoid white people looking angels as opposed to just mechanistic drones. And we're not supposed to kind of have the mythology part of our brain turned on. And that's not the part you want turned on if you're dealing with a science fiction book, where the whole point of the book is to say, here is the world as it really could be. That's the main problem. So what is, we can't get to that world, and we can't get to that world on this whole, and then a miracle occurs. Because, in the sense of dealing with the political philosophy of anarcho-capitalism to begin with, there is a big and then a miracle occurs just in the idea that this present society is going to collapse, and then we're going to have a society rise from the ashes that's actually going to be a better society, a stateless society, something that is run by these DROs rather than by government. You can't just put that all into a miracle type form. There has to be something undergirding it. There has to be a reality undergirding that. And I feel like he's almost mocking anarcho-capitalism in that way by saying, well, I'll start my book with a creation myth because, who the hell knows how we're actually going to get to this society that we're talking about. So what is the solution to the prologue? Well, unfortunately, I think the only real solution here is ditch the prologue. Just drop the reader into this utopian future and let the reader get acclimated to it. Let the reader just soak in the utopia, and then the reader's own curiosity about how we got to this point is going to be triggered soon enough. And moreover, the book's synopsis basically says that you're going to have somebody from the past awaken in this future. Naturally, that person's going to have questions. So we already have the idea that we're going to get the answer somehow. Just start in the future and let us experience the world that you want us to see. So that is my first installment of reviewing the future. Next, I will be dealing with the next two chapters, and then I will be inserting a previous video that I've already made where I did not reveal that it was the future that I was reviewing at the time. So you may already see that in the playlist, but it's actually going to be my third video in the list once I get everything updated and once I upload my second video in the series. So thank you for watching. I hope you join me for this because there's going to be some very interesting concepts that are brought up. I mean, the whole idea of a stateless society in which you don't have governments, but rather all relationships, even down to the relationship between parent and child, are considered voluntary relationships that one can opt out of if desired. It's a really intriguing concept. Whether it could actually work in the real world, who the heck knows? But That is going to be the job of this book, The Future, to give people the idea that not only is this a just and moral philosophy, that the stateless society is really the only kind of moral, quote unquote, government that there can be, but that it's actually attainable. And to read something that ambitious is really what I'm looking forward to doing. Even though, having read a few chapters already, I'm kind of a little bit bummed by the overall product so far. And I will be getting into some of that in my next video when I cover chapters 1 and 2. So thank you again. I'm Mike Partika. Please do follow me on Gab for my social media contact. And then I'm also on YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble, so you can pick whichever of those video sites you prefer. And you can find my books on Amazon.com. And beyond that, I will talk to you all later.